Hello fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I have found another vintage science fiction mind twister. And this comes to us from the British writer David G. Compton, or D.G. Compton. He was born in 1930 and passed away fairly recently in 2023, November of 2023. I've decided to put my entire collection of D.G. Compton up here. There is one that is missing that has become quite popular on BookTube, I think because of Bookpilled, and that is the Continuous Catherine Morton-Ho, I think it's called. But anyway, the one that I chose to talk about is Synthajoy. And I chose this one because Richard Rempel from Vintage SF was talking to me and said, you know, this is kind of like a dream machine. It's a little bit different. It doesn't fit into the subgenre we kind of created in this channel of dream machines, but it is dang close. And Richard mentioned, and I've seen this written in other places as well, that a lot of people consider this a very early cyberpunk style book. So this novel came out in 1968. It was first published in the Ace Science Fiction Specials series. And Richard Rempel always says, who does the art on these? I think it's Dylan is the last name. It's two people. But yeah, this is where it was first published in America. I know that it does have a hardback version in England as well, but it was published in 1968, and it takes place in the 1990s, so in the near future for when this was written. And it is about an invention called Sensi tape, which is these two men, Edward, who is the main idea guy and scientist, and Tony, who is the engineer, come up with a way to record people's brains when they're doing things. And because they can record this, it gives people the ability to play it back. Seems very simple, but the subtlety and the complexities of what this could mean are huge. So basically, you can plug in this tape, you put on a headset and play this Sensi tape, and you can experience doing things that you normally wouldn't be able to. The best example that I can give from the book is they record a very well-known and beloved composer as he conducts a symphony performance. And you can play that Sensi tape in your brain, and it's you conducting that orchestra. It's as if the reality is it's you doing it, and you're experiencing all the passion that artist feels as he does that. And of course, as the novel goes on, the implications of this get bigger and bigger and bigger. For instance, they record sexy tape, which is they find two people that are able to enjoy the sexual experience very much, and they record that so that you can either play the tape back from the male perspective or the female perspective, and then people will be able to experience very fulfilling sex by listening to this tape. Well, not even listening, by experiencing this sexy tape. Unfortunately, the one part where this novel really shows its age for me, and this is just a throwaway line in the novel, is that one of the great effects that this sexy tape could have is you could play it for gay people and it would make them not be gay anymore, which is, of course, now we know, ridiculous. But when you read stuff that's older like this, you're going to find stuff like that. So that was really the only moment I found in this novel that was really dated. So, of course, this becomes very popular. There are even tapes of people experiencing drug highs, and they can make tapes so you can experience the drug high without taking the drugs. And people become addicted to those tapes. It's really a very wild concept. It's one of the earliest virtual reality concepts that I've seen. And of course, because of that, we can see why it is considered a cyberpunk, a kind of early cyberpunk novel as well. So we'll leave that there for a minute. You can see why I love this. This is very much up my alley, and it's perfect for the channel. Richard is absolutely right. Let's get into the more direct synopsis of this book. This book takes place, slight spoilers, you can't really spoil this novel. It is really fun to read, just cold. So if you're like, wow, that sounds incredible, then you can pause the video here and go read the book and come back and listen to it. But again, these spoilers are so slight. I'll give you a warning when it gets into the real deep spoilers, but most of this comes out really quickly in the novel. So this novel takes place right after the death of Edward, the person that invented these Sensi tapes. And his wife has been found guilty for that murder. Her name is Thea, and she is our narrator. She is our protagonist. Everything is from her perspective, and she is being punished by a therapist using Sensi tape on her, the thing that she helped create. She's just a brilliant psychologist and was one of the three that helped kind of create this. So she is basically now on the other side and being treated with Sensi tape. And what they're doing is the court has ordered that she be filled with contrition for what she did to her husband. And her husband has become a very important person because he invented Sensi tape. But it seems like they're actually filling her with guilt by using Sensi tape. And she is not in her right mind by any stretch of the imagination. They've obviously damaged her brain from all this Sensi tape, but she herself has dealt with some severe trauma that we don't really know what happened, but it seems intense. So we're given a classic unreliable narrator, and this narration is all over the place. So we'll be in the hospital in present time dealing with her and her treatment, and then suddenly we'll be in the past. And through this jumping around manner, the entire story is told. It's strangely a bit of a whodunit, and that's not always my favorite, and we'll get into that in a bit. But the mystery is good. It's really solid. And trying to piece this together, in a sense, it reminds me a little bit, not even the same genres 100%, but in a sense it reminds me of the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, in that you have to try and figure out what the narrator is actually talking about when the narrator doesn't speak the same language you do. Not specifically the same language you do, but doesn't call things the same thing you call them. And that's what this book is like. We have to piece together everything that happened through a mind that doesn't think the same way that ours would. It's really, really wild and very interesting. And I feel really close to what I would consider a classic of literature. I could easily see this being assigned in one of the classes I took in college, or assigning it to my students. It's wild. It plays with narrative. It's really, really very interesting. That said, it wasn't my absolute favorite read. I think I would give it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I don't usually rate stuff, but I want to with this one, just to show you that it was above average good. It really was. But for me, it had some flaws that might just be my taste in reading. I always have such a hard time ranking books because other readers could find them so wonderful. So I try to just say exactly what they are in order to point people to directions that they like. And this lacked a direction that I think would have made this up there for me with the type of books that I love, like the, Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch by Philip K. Dick, or Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. These really, really mind-bending, riddle-like science fiction novels. I feel like this one was almost there, but he made a choice that I didn't like as much. And that was that, and I don't know how they're achieving this. It confused me throughout the book. And that is that somehow does not remember this treatment. And as I've read all the way through and thought about it more, I believe they're drugging her with medication in order for her not to remember the treatments, which I don't quite know why. But what it means is the author never gives us actual experience of sensitape. Like, say, in Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, they've got the Mercer machine, where they have religious experiences to elevate their empathy. We experience exactly what they experience in there, and the weirdness of that is kind of what I connect to the new wave science fiction that I love so much. This one feels like it has insane implications and new wave ideas, but never tackles them head on. It always looks at them without having to show us a person experiencing them. Even so much as saying, for some odd reason, instead of just making her feel guilt, like the sensitapes are supposed to do, they're drugging her so she won't remember doing them. I don't understand. It felt to me like the author didn't want to get into the weird of it. And all that conversation we had at the beginning of this video, where I talked about all the implications of that, are barely touched on in this novel. They're all pushed aside, I feel, to tell us the very mundane story of the fame-obsessed creator of this product and who wants a piece of the monetary pie that this product's going to make. He gets involved with the mob at one point. And while it was talking about this, all I wanted was to really jump in and explore the concept of sensitape. And right at the end, he's starting to create a newer product that is just basically all these different aspects of sensitape made into one perfect human experience called Synthajoy. And that's where the title of the book comes from. And that is incredible. And we see somebody try it, but it's not the person who is the main narrator, so we never really get to experience Synthajoy. So that, to me, is kind of the failing of this novel, is where other new wave writers were very gung-ho about jumping into the actuality of what these mind-bending technologies would do to a person. I mean, I just think of the Three Stigmata of Palmer Eldritch, where he's a ghost going through time. The drug makes him this ghost that's able to go back and forth in time. It's just wild, and he doesn't know his true identity, and it's just insanely cool and very strange. This seems to stay very much in reality. It doesn't take us into what Synthajoy does to the mind directly. It's clinical people standing back and talking about what Synthajoy does to the mind. And I really wish we could have gotten in there. And the narrator is in the process of having it done to her every day. So there was so many opportunities for him to go into what that would do on a mental level, which he does. She's being shattered, and we see the effects of the Sensi tape treatments on her, but we never experience the Sensi tape treatments. Does that make sense? So to me, a lot of people have said this is a very difficult novel, and I found the opposite. I think it's a very easy novel. You have to be able to deal with some shattered narrative. You got to be able to allow story to be told in random order, which this does. But that's the hardest thing I think this does, except for the end, which I do want to talk about. I'm not going to do a deep reading of this novel, but we do have to talk about the end, which means now we're going into real spoiler territory. So if you haven't read the book and you want to, click off now and come back and read the after you've read the book. Also, while we're taking this quick break for people to log off if they want to read the book, go ahead and click like and subscribe. And if you would like to help support this channel, go ahead and check out our Patreon. Putting up Patreon only stuff over there once a week, along with the videos that I put up here. I put up over there without ads. So yeah, if you'd like to help this channel, go check that out. All right, the ending of this book. It ends vaguely, and I don't mind a book that ends vaguely. That's fine with me, especially a book that ends vaguely that I feel gives enough pieces for somebody who is willing to take the time to sit there and look at the end of this book as a riddle to try and figure out. And I feel like this book does that. And I'm openly going to say that I haven't given this enough time yet. I don't think. I think I would have to read this 4 or 5, not the book, but the end, 4 or 5 more times to really start to get it. But I believe I have a basic interpretation and understanding of this ending. There's a couple of things that have to be considered in the end. There's a few huge reveals. So I'm going to focus on the earliest of the reveals from the end of this book. And that is this entire novel. We believe that Thea and Tony have been having an affair. Of course, Thea is married to Edward. Tony's the engineer. And Thea really loves Tony. But Edward was the first one to start having an affair because Thea suddenly couldn't stomach having sex with her husband anymore. And this is presented in such a way that it's presented in the court during the trial. And it's everybody's guessing at why she suddenly couldn't have sex. One person is saying it's because of trauma from her childhood, that her parents raised her terribly. And then another person is saying it's because she was in love with Tony and couldn't handle being with her husband anymore, which is the one that I accepted as true. And the novel very brilliantly eventually lets us know at the end that the entire time that I thought she was having an affair with Tony, they actually weren't sleeping together. They were having more of an emotional affair. And then finally one day she feels ready and tries to make love to Tony and has the same visceral reaction where she actually goes to the toilet and throws up and can't bring herself to do it. And Tony says, I never knew how much that affected you. And the antecedent of that is left vague, but we know that he's what I feel like he's talking about is earlier in the novel when they recorded the sexy tape, they all experienced it while they were recording it. They were sitting in the van recording it while it was happening up in this room, but they were all experiencing it as if they were one of the two, and it wasn't enjoyable for her. In fact, to her, it felt a little bit like being SA'd, and she is responding to this experience as as if it were heavy trauma, which it is. And I thought that was really brilliant. And it was the first time where I felt like the actual problems with these tapes were being discussed directly, not in a vague, what would this do to society kind of way, but directly to her. Recording that sexy tape ruined her ability to enjoy making love with people because it was so traumatic for her, which I thought was really brilliant. And then we get the whodunit part, which is, I think, the reason that this gets some bad reviews, because that's what he leaves vague at the end. So we learn that Thea, the night that her husband is killed, goes home, sees her husband's mistress, who she calls Mrs. X, on the stairs. They pass, she goes up, and her husband is shot dead on the bed. And she, in order to punish herself, she never admits to seeing Mrs. X there, which is why she's eventually found guilty of killing her husband. And she's got this perverse desire to martyr herself. At the end, we realize that a couple of things. Number one, she did kill her husband. It wasn't Mrs. X. Number two, she is going to take over the company when she's done with her Sensitape treatments, which is wild. So they're making her feel guilty, and then they're going to use contrition, and then she's going to go out and take over the company. She's going to become the head of the company. And the part that's vague is, it leaves you with this question, wait a minute, are they shaping her reality to make her think she committed the crime, so that she can come out and run the company, which takes away her desire to be this martyr and let Mrs. X win? Because Mrs. X is suing the company for a bunch of money, and this whole time she's been wanting her to win so that she can take on the guilt she feels from the fact that her husband released Sensitape to the world. Are they trying to destroy that desire for her to martyr herself? Are they trying to destroy that inside of her so she can come out and be kind of this ruthless owner of the company? And that's what it ends with, is with this concept where she's like, I'm not going to be a martyr. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to kick ass. I'm going to make so much money off of this. And I think that that's really the important aspect of the end. We're led to believe it's a whodunit, and it is. It's a mystery. But in the end, I think D.G. Compton's statement is they're going to force her to become the type of cutthroat businesswoman that they need in order to run this company from an ultra, let's get filthy rich sort of way. And I feel like that is what they're actually doing to her with those tapes. Have you read this book? If you have and you had a different take on the end, absolutely let me know in the comments. I love hearing everybody's different takes, but that's kind of my take on it. I know that it can be upsetting. The same thing happens at the end of Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World. A lot of people are like, it ends terribly, and I disagree. I think that a vague ending is fine if you're willing to take the time to try to piece together what the writer wants you to piece together. So I feel like this is a good experience, and a lot of people say it's a bad experience because of that ending, but I do feel like it's a good experience. Other than that glaring problem for me, which is not the fault of D.G. Compton, that he never really looked into what Sensitape actually meant on a level inside the human brain and what it, like, putting us through the process. This was a really wonderful read. This was mind-bending. This was strange. I think it is worth a read, especially for a fractured narrative. It's really interesting that way. Yeah, so give it a go. See what you think. All right, that's all I have for now. We'll see you next time.